All right, guys, as people are starting to come in here, let me tell you a little bit about what's going to happen in this next section. So for the past 3 years, we have been live recording a podcast that goes out. We've been doing a podcast for, 5-6 years now called Basic Business Advice, where we've been talking to people. We've had folks like Eric Gerber at EcoSeal on here not too long ago. Kevin West has been a multi-time guest. Chad spoke just a month or two ago on this. Lindsay has shared a ton, and Ken used to actually co-host it with me before he became just too busy to make time for it. But we've been live recording this, which means everything past the point I say, howdy, will be on a live recording, which it encourages you to, one, heckle anybody on stage, point and laugh all you want. We'll make sure we catch it all. But we really drive off your energy from this. And so we've picked a topic today that I hope is going to land either in your frustration of being for or against what we're talking about. And I will say there is no generational infighting after we get done with this today, because this is definitively something that's probably going to find lines in the space. So, without further ado, Tyler, this is your count-in for the live recording. Howdy, folks, and you're listening to Basic Business Advice. This is Chris White, and we're live at GAPCON today with a crowd of people who have been well-fed, well-taught, and now are ready to wrap up the day. I have a panel with me today: Kevin West on my far right, Chad Heller, Ken Hostetler, and Lindsay Chupp. They've been seen around the space today. Lindsay's been talking on and off, so her voice may be a little hoarse by the time it's all said and done. But we're going to talk about a topic today that has been frustrating for a lot of business owners. As a show of hands for my participants who are here, and we'll count it out for our listeners online, how many of you, when you started work, you had the expectation that in order to be a good employee, you would go above and beyond what was asked of you? Just by a show of hands, how many of you started work with that expectation? How many of you, keep your hands up for a second, how many of you was that ever actually said to you? A couple. We got a couple people that it was actually said. Okay, you can put all your hands down now. Most of you put your hand down, though. Nobody ever came to you and said, you need to go above and beyond. You were lucky, probably, if you had a job description to go by, and it wasn't just somebody pointing you in a direction and say, figure it out. In the recent years, it has come to the forefront that the above and beyond mentality maybe hasn't landed so well in the newest generation entering the workforce. How many people who are employers here who had that mentality when you entered the workforce of going above and beyond, look at some of your newest employees, and I mean newest as in age range, and you wonder, did anybody ever teach them how to work? How many of you have ever wondered whether they have learned how to? How many of you wondered if they really want to go above and beyond? A couple of you out there. There has been some dissonance. And in this panel today, I want to ask these guys to discuss, is that right or wrong? Is it morally right to go above and beyond? Is it morally wrong just to do what you're paid to do and go home? We have a very interesting development that is starting to creep its way into our communities. And so, Kevin, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Kevin, you're a business coach. You talk nationally. You've been working with multiple manufacturing companies that I'm sure have a broad demographic of people that work for them. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting because there are definitely generational dynamics that come into play, and we like to make fun of those. We make light of the differences in generations, and I think that's probably happened forever. But I think that specifically when it comes to work, every generation has a different kind of exposure to it and a different kind of experience with what that means. When I was a kid, we took a lawnmower and walked around the neighborhood with a gas can and mowed people's grass. And in the wintertime, we took a shovel and we shoveled people's driveways. And you got whatever you got, you did. I remember taking Buckeyes, and I'm a Michigan fan, by the way, and I would, I get that, and I would, there you go, we get started. But I would make necklaces and sell them door to door. And I think I even took fruit out of people's yards and then tried to sell it to them. So there was always an entrepreneurial spirit in the dynamic of that. And then generationally over, that's how you got money. And then every generation wants the next generation to have it better than they had it. And I think the dynamic of a boomer generation whose parents, when you scratched your arm or your legs, had put dirt on it and locked you out of the house at the beginning of the day and let you back in at night, that whole generation wanted something different for their kids. And I think in a way we overfunctioned. And I think a lot of what our dissatisfactions are built around our dynamics that a generation created for another. And I think we've handcuffed them.
Ken, I want to jump over to you for a second.
All right.
You definitively grew up in this community.
Sure.
You understand those the unspoken values that those people who said, I had this expectation, but nobody's ever actually told me about it. How do you confront this?
Yeah, so clearly from the employer side, it's great, right? Like we love being in this community because a lot of people do meet the unspoken expectations. I take a little bit different view from the standpoint of, I think it's okay for some pushback on that. I think that it's okay for current employees to say, do I want my parents' dream? Do I want to follow in their footsteps? Now, there's limits with that, but certainly I think it's an area that we need to talk about.
So let me jump then to Lindsay. Lindsay, probably per capita of anybody in this building, you employ more Gen Zers than anybody on a per capita level. What's your experience here?
Well, we have a great team. I have to say that because they're all
sitting
here
right front and center here as well, watching her say all this.
And nothing makes you feel older than working with a bunch of 20-year-olds. So it has been interesting to observe the generation in that what their level of experience is coming out of college and maybe their level of work. Like Kevin said, I started working when I was 14. It's just, life was different then, right? But we want to do the same thing for our kids. And so there's maybe a little bit more soft skills training that goes into bringing somebody into the workforce. So we're noticing that maybe this generation did not grow up answering the phone, hello, shown our residence, and being yelled at if they're not answering the phone in a very polite manner. There's a level of communication that I was expected to have as a child that kids nowadays, including my children, are not having. When my kids first, we got a flip phone at home so that they could call us when they got home from school, and I realized how rude they were almost immediately. And I was like, okay, whoa. They're like, what? No, this is not how we answer the phone. So it becomes apparent that there's some things that we, as a generation, probably take for granted that were built into us as very young children, that coming into the workforce, there might be experience in levels of communication and relationship. And also to add to that, they have a level of pressure that we didn't have either. I didn't have anybody documenting all of the mistakes I made as a teenager through social media. And so there's a level of pressure and expectation and almost like a, needing to be perfect that we don't have that. So I think we need to find that middle ground to relate to what they have experienced so we have it.
So Chad, you've been waiting patiently. As on the stage here, Hummel has a multi-generational workforce. You have folks that would quantify as boomers, all the way down to, I'm sure, Gen Zers. You see this probably in real time. What's your perspective on this?
I think it's hard to lump them all into one. When you say Generation Z and millennials, I don't know if that's fair. I think you can see that there are different personalities even within the millennials and Gen Zs. So I don't know. I have a hard time with the whole, let's lump them into this, and they're not going to respond the way, you know, our parents responded or the way we responded. You know, I do feel with 175 employees, you can't put it in a can and just say, this is universal, you're going to work this way. You've got to look at the workloads, you got to look at how people respond to workloads. And some people just are not driven. So motivating them in a way that resonates with them, not necessarily with the company. So I've noticed with the younger generation too, it is more, and I am lumping, and I said we shouldn't, but I'm lumping them into it a little bit, what is in it for me? Yeah. So that can be tricky.
So it's interesting because all the four of you here have said something along a similar line, that there's investment in this. How many business owners, another show of hands, how many of you opened your small business to teach somebody else how to work? Oh, shocking. Not a single person. Not a single person. You guys just said, though, you have a workforce coming in that there may be some teaching. Some of those expectations have changed, and they're not even bringing you those skill sets that you have an expectation that's there. These people didn't open their businesses to teach people how to do that stuff. Why should they?
Well, they should, because you know, we have this unspoken expectation they should care about the business as much as the owner, but they're not the owner. You know, you know, I think every individual employee has their own personal business model. And I feel like there's a huge shift that's happening in business today where businesses, you know, I always tell the business owners I work with, you know, the best potential of me is we. And so if we can flip this thing upside down and make this more about the personal business model of everybody in the organization, because every person has a brand, every person has a value, every person has a stake in their own success journey in terms of what they're doing. If we can put them and set them up to win and operationalize our language in terms of our mission and our vision and connect the two of them, we can do some damage. Like we can, because I always call them whippersnappers, but the whippersnappers are a force of nature. It's just a matter of caring about the right things. And I think it's just it's a shift in thinking.
I got to jump in on this. So I understand, and I hear this a lot from business owners of, well, you need to meet the individual, right? But it's really hard when you have a lot of individuals to meet each person's goal and desire and what drives them. So do you have any input on that? Like, is there anything that you're like, oh, hey, this is where you need to start?
Well, I think when you can take and operationalize things, and like we have a lot of words like engagement. I want our team to be engaged. Well, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? How does that behave? How does that walk down the hall? You know, what is that, you know, how do we put our training and our development of our employees in line with those items and actually develop skill sets around those things and move in that direction? And I think organizations need to have good fights about it. Like, you need a fight. You need to get in a room and you get mad. And you need to be able to walk out and be on the same page. And I think we just don't do that enough. We hide from that because it's work. And we would just rather make our stuff and get paid. And rather than just do the hard work of creating an organization that's so attractive that people would line up to want to work there. And I think that's the struggle. And we just need to honor it. We just need to lean into it.
Yeah, I really agree. Brene Brown uses the word rumble with difficult problems, and I think that's it, right? Like, a lot of these things, you know, we can kind of paint broad brushstrokes and we can say, hey, you should do this, you should do this. But the reality is exactly what you said. It takes a lot of really hard work and a lot of disagreement. Chris and I have been going through this for a while.
10 years.
10 years. And it's taken us a really long time to be okay with disagreeing with each other. And I think culturally, that's really hard sometimes. So, yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin.
So this community is really great. I love this disagreement topic because everybody in this community disagrees so easily with each other. You know, they're happy to get up in the morning and tell them how their neighbor and how their coworker did not do what they were asking. And this is, you know, I think this is going to land solidly. And for anybody who can't tell, this is sarcasm. And you guys just said, fight it out. Not fight with each other, but fight it out to a community of people that, that's not our strong set. That's not necessarily our strong set. So now we've got a group of people who started out wanting to make widgets or provide these services that we're telling them, no, you're going to have to teach and engage and fight. I mean, it seems like we're getting further away from why we even started what we were doing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I want to get us back to the original question of, you know, what the expectation should be for employees and how that's changed. But I do think that we have to be able to recognize that we're going to probably disagree about some of the opinions of the newer workforce and kind of what their views are, but we're still going to have to figure that out, right?
Lindsay, I see you stewing over there. What are you thinking?
I was thinking that when I was 20 years old, I did go above and beyond. I was raised with that mentality too. My very first job, I worked at a bank, and it was in Akron. I was in college, and she hired me because I was from Holmes County. So she's like, I know you're from Amish country. You're going to work really hard. But even to say that, I still worked and left work and was at home, and I wasn't like obsessing with work and like, you know, thinking about it. I think the way that, like Kevin said, they're not the business owner. But what I didn't realize in my 20s was the potential that I had. And I think, you know, now in my 30s and the older that I get, you realize what life is and what it means and what you can actually potentially attain and get. And so I'm just wondering generationally how this will change. I'm technically the oldest millennial there is, and I'm proud to say that because I don't want to be an Xer. So, but like, you know, that was a bad connotation for a really long time. So people didn't want to have that reputation either. But our generation, you know, everybody thought that they just we want to find meaning in work and all of the things. It's not turning out bad. So why do we think that it's such a bad thing where they're at now? And you know, why is it so bad where we're at? I guess, what does this generation have that we don't see bringing into the workforce? What perspectives can they give us? So I don't have the answers to that. It's just kind of what I'm pondering and having our staff that we have.
So now that we also have to provide meaningful work, not just, you know, punching the clock and in and out to make things happen. This sounds like we're adding a lot of responsibilities on business leaders for the future of their business. Chad, what are your thoughts?
Employees are our clients. If we're running a business, the business has clients, but as leaders, the team are our clients. So we would go above and beyond for our clients, wouldn't we? And so there we should also go above and beyond for our staff. And I think, you know, we talked about this is hard work, but I think really what it boils down to is getting to know your staff as well. So sitting down and talking to them. I think I think Kevin, you were mentioned in another session about bumping into your staff. I think Jordan mentioned that, and just taking the time to get to know them. What are they driven by? What are their what's important to them? And maybe it's not work related. I've had several opportunities in which I've had staff that were underperforming, and you know, you sit in your office and you're like, what are they doing? We've got to figure out, you know, we've got to do a, you know, some sort of performance improvement plan, or we've got to do this or that. And when you sit down with them and you actually talk to them, you say, hey, what's going on? And you find out, you know, they're having a hard time at home. It's like, oh, Okay. So it changes the perspective. And so finding the meaning that they have, or that what their meaning is, I think that's important for us to understand so that we can then bring meaning maybe to the work as well.
So did you all see that, what Chad just did? In the nicest way possible, Chad just judo flipped the complaint that these people don't want to work as hard as I do to, are you willing to work that hard for your people? He just took the energy that we as leaders want to direct at people that don't work like us and maybe don't, and he said, but are you willing to work for them? That is rumbling it out. That is fighting it out. That move right there was so excellently done that none of you even squeamished a little bit when he said it, did you? That was really well done. In fact, we could end it all, but I'm not going to because I want to keep poking at this. Kevin, you deal with the manufacturing industry. Manufacturing industry is aging. It's also automating. How are your people, how do you talk to your people about engaging their teams, engaging in this process, treating their teams, like Chad said, going above and beyond for their teams?
I think let me poke. I want to stir the pot a little bit.
Yeah, stir it.
I think I coach a lot of emerging leaders all across the country, and whippersnappers alike. These 18 to 25, 26-year-olds. It's phenomenal. It's a blast because the energy level's there. I think that generation gets a bad rap in terms of that. But let me tell you what I've learned. I have learned that they are masters of discernment. And when you have an organization that is built around this idea, right, wrong, or otherwise, that the time in myth, I've been here for 20 years, that kind of language exists in an organization. Well, I've been here for 20 years. Yeah, but it's been year 2 18 times. And the kids know it. They figured it out, and they're asking hard questions that person cannot answer. And all of a sudden now there's a tension that brews because they're trying to figure out where their path is in the organization. How in the world do I grow? Where do I position? How do I pivot? What do I do with this? And I'm gonna bump into this guy that he's just locked in and he's doing today what he did yesterday, hoping he gets paid more tomorrow. And is that what this is? And that's the question they're asking. Is this all there is? Mm. So when we talk about meaning, it's not like some ethereal kind of thing where we all gotta sing Kumbaya and hold hands. This is like something where it's like, hey, give me a pathway and let me grow. And if a business owner sits down and says, let me be about the business of you, and let me help you develop in such a way that you can position an organization and pivot into new opportunities so you can continue to make more money and continue to make a difference and add value to an organization, that's a game changer. And it is a shift of a mindset, just like you did, you flipped it. But I think that's the challenge. And manufacturing has got to figure this out because it's not going anywhere. And we got a whole nother group of youngsters coming right behind them. So what are we gonna do? How are we gonna do this? Somewhere along the way, I think we have to dial in and really start committing to have conversations and start making time and creating time in the organization for these things to get addressed. And for businesses gotta start playing chess.
Okay,
they
so
just have to
for any
start
of
playing
you,
chess.
why is that so hard? Why is what Kevin just said so hard? The whippersnappers come and say, is this all there is? And you're on the receiving end of that. Why is that so hard?
It's a change in what the expectation has been for the employer, right? I think that we've expected that people are going to buy into the idea that you come, you spend time, you work hard, and if you meet these sometimes objective, sometimes subjective goals, you're going to get promoted, you're going to get to be a manager, you're going to have certain perks. We have all of these things, and some of these people are saying, hold up, I'm not signing up for that. That's not what I'm agreeing to. And so we're going, okay, well, what do you want? We're not exactly sure how you fit in here because everyone else has bought into this. And I think that creates some difficult questions.
Chad, Lindsay, why is that so hard if somebody comes to you and says, is this all there is?
I am young and owning a business, so if one of our employees came to us and said that, I would feel like it's a punch in the gut, because all my blood, sweat, and tears is going into building this. Similar to like if your kids come to you and they're upset and they're like, it feels a little bit ungrateful, I guess. But that's me taking it too personally, because it's not personal really when it comes down to it on that end. So I don't know that I have the answers for that yet, but it is certainly something to consider. I'm probably not going to take that very well.
I think it's hard because most businesses are focused on the growth of the business and not necessarily the growth of the role. Mm-hmm. So when the employee comes to you and says, I want to grow, you're like, well, it doesn't really fit into the planned growth of the business. I've never focused on the growth of that role. So it puts you in an odd spot.
Does it feel, and let me ask just an open question to the four of you, does it feel like what Lindsay just said? You haven't been around through all the hard times that took us to get here. Who are you to ask me about this? Does it feel like we've tuned them out because they don't have the experience and they weren't here for the blood, sweat, and tears? Hummel's been how old now? Old?
63?
Something like that?
Something like that.
New folks haven't been there through the hardest seasons of building Hummel into what it has become. But if somebody walks up and says, Chad, is this really all they were about? That's rough.
Hey, Chris, can I speak to that?
Yeah.
I think that the thing that jumps out to me and when I have conversations like that, and that's a great question that you're asking. You know, and if you're a whippersnapper, if you're out there, if you're an emerging leader, don't abdicate your growth or your development to someone else. And it's about being responsible to and responsible for. You're responsible to do what you need to do every day to add value to the organization, but you're responsible for your growth. It's not the organization's job necessarily to do everything for you, because we live in this stinking digital age where you can go on YouTube and bang the keyboard and get something out of there that's going to help you grow. So it's not like you have things like this. There's a ton of stuff out there. And so a lot of frustration that lives into the is this all there is thing? I take responsibility back. You know, take it back and lean into, think about all the young social media people are out there who are learning about doing social media on their own, watching things online and doing very well, making a life for that. And I think that's one of those things that starts to compete for this generation's attention. You know, there's this whole idea of looking at these people on social media who are, crushing it and perfect and doing all these things, and their aspirations are lining up with that kind of lifestyle. But now I'm going to work my 9 to 5. And I have to balance those two things in my mind. But I do think that at the end of the day, the organizations I think that are incredibly successful are the ones that are thinking about what you're talking about, that have flipped it and think about how the ones that are locally that are successful and what they invest their time and energy in terms of development. It's huge. But at the same time, I think for individuals, you can't wait. Life's too short. So you have to go. You have to be going somewhere, and you have to kind of decide where you want to go.
So at the core of this, is it personal?
I don't know. I'm thinking about, when unemployment's at 10%, sure, we can tell people it's personal, right? When unemployment's where it's at and we have the difficulty that we have hiring right now, I don't know that we can just tell people, go figure it out. So I want to ask a question for the three of you. I guess kind of follow up with that is there room for in your organizations or the organizations that you work with for people who simply say, look, I'm signing up for 9 to 5. Give me my responsibilities. If you need me outside of that, good luck. I don't want any of the additional things. This is what I'm signing up for. Is there space for people like that? Or are you saying, hey, everybody's got to be above and beyond, or we don't have room for you on the bus?
I mean, I think absolutely there's space. I mean, we've got, I'm speaking of Hummel, we've got people behind the scenes doing a lot of data entry. I couldn't do that. I need some sort of human contact. But the people that are in that spot, they enjoy it. And then there's the ones that like to go out and sell. They enjoy that. And so finding the right seat, I think, is absolutely important. I think every organization should be looking at that very carefully, because the moment you move them to the wrong seat, then you have a problem. So,
Sure. What if they're in the right seat, but they're just doing the bare minimum?
I think it's great.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's great. Why not? Because I look at it as an opportunity. I have now a pool that I can inspire. So if I can inspire and activate them to see themselves bigger than they see themselves currently, a lot of people shrink themselves into, they play small, and they shrink themselves into the minimum. But we know that people have so much more in their lives. And as I'm a geezer, I just turned 60. That's like rocking my world right now. But it's one of those things where it's like, I look at that and I go, oh my heavens, the potential that exists in this world and what's available to you is so out there. Let's be about you. What's next? What are you dreaming about? It's about pulling out those things out of them. And to me, I think that would be fun. I think that would be exciting.
I love your optimism. I do. I think sometimes it's hard to figure out, okay, well, if somebody's doing the bare minimum, do we tolerate it, or do we try to get them to grow? And if we can't get them to grow, where do we go from here? I think those are some of the things we rumble with.
To add to that, are employers afraid to ask their employees what they're dreaming of because they're not sure what they're going to hear? What if their dream doesn't include you?
But see, let's don't run away from that. Like, I think let's run to it. Mm-hmm. Because then, if I have this saying, success is succession. So when we start building the succession dynamics in the organization, let's send these guys off to rock the free world. If I only got you for 3 years, let's make it the best 3 years we got. And let's do as much damage as possible, and let's get the next one up. And let's get them going. Eventually, the numbers game works in your favor. Eventually, you stumble on somebody who's a rock star, and you take them to another level, and they do stuff for you beyond anything you would ever think. But until then, if we're just committed to the success of people, regardless of whether it's with us or not, I think that's attractive, and I think people would line up for that.
Well, guys, if I could have designed a perfect course for this conversation, this would have been it. Because what I wanted to start with was the idea that there is frustration, generational frustration, kind of stewing. And sometimes it doesn't have a voice, and sometimes it doesn't sit. And I appreciate that you guys let me kind of take the positions of some of the things I've heard here. And you have really wrestled with that. And then, Chad, how you flipped it. You flipped it back on its head, because that frustration is mostly, I think, born out of the fact that we started this business to do this thing, and now it's this size, and our thing has changed. Mm-hmm. Our thing has become our people, our team. And it's not their problem to help find the way forward. It's ours to help coach and inspire and maybe drag kicking and screaming at times towards the next. So thank you, guys. Could you guys give them a round of applause for taking time with us here? So on behalf of Kevin and Chad and Ken and Lindsay, this is Chris White, and you've been listening to Basic Business Advice. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.